Welcome to Habits and Humor, where you come to make serious progress without taking life too seriously. This podcast shows how we can create powerful daily habits and enjoy life at the same time. I'm Susie B, and this is Habits and Humor. Come to laugh, stay to learn, choose to live. Welcome to the Habits and Humor podcast. I'm Susie B, and I'm joined today by Hellen Mallaburn. Welcome to the show, Hellen.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. So we're so glad that Hellen is here today because she's going to talk to us about inflammation. Let's just jump right into what is inflammation and how do we know if we have it and if it's causing problems for us?
Okay, so inflammation is a normal response of your immune system. It should be adaptive. It should turn itself on and turn itself off. So if you have an injury, an infection, it should be switched on. And then as soon as that is cleared, it should turn itself back off again. The problem comes when it becomes constantly switched on, when it becomes chronic, basically. And you can have a huge amount of symptoms. You may find you've got weight gain. You may find you're having gut issues or joint pain. You may be experiencing headaches or sinus problems, skin rashes. There is hundreds and hundreds of symptoms that can indicate that you are having inflammation. If you have got a chronic illness, it is likely that inflammation plays a major part in that. So if you have an autoimmune condition, inflammation is for sure playing a massive part in that.
Any autoimmune condition?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So we've got inflammation going on. There's things in our body that are, it's sort of like it's fighting itself, right? Isn't that what inflammation kind of does?
Yeah, so when it's in control and doing what it should be, it's obviously fighting at the site of injuries and kind of infections for viruses and things like that. Non-communicable diseases generally these days are chronic and they have a huge inflammatory component of them. So yeah, the autoimmune side of it is your immune system is attacking itself, and inflammation is a huge part of that immune response.
Wow. So your immune system is attacking itself. What do we feel when that happens? Like, are we going to feel bloated? Are we going to feel tired? Are we going to feel pain? Like, how do we know if that's what's going on?
It can be very individual, but fatigue is a major symptom generally, because if that process is going on in the background continuously, it's going to be using your resources, your nutrients that you need for other processes to deal with that inflammation. And that immune response. So yeah, fatigue for one is going to be a major one. Another major one that I experienced was brain fog, and that is a hugely common thing with Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism.
Okay.
Yeah, weight gain again can be part of that response. That elevated cortisol, because of that inflammatory response, can cause that weight gain issues. So that's another big symptom of hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's. Yeah, there are a lot of symptoms. So it's very difficult to say exact which symptoms which people are going to be experiencing. But if you are experiencing things like joint pain, inflammation is likely at play if you're having joint pain, muscle pain the same, gut issues the same.
Okay. Does it matter if you know, do you need a diagnosis to know, okay, this is hypothyroidism, or this is Hashimoto's, or this is inflammation? Like, do you need to know specifically what it is, or do you kind of treat those all the same?
It completely depends on the immune issue that's going on. With Hashimoto's, it's really good to know if that's what is causing it, because it will eventually lead to hypothyroidism, which you would need medication for.
Okay.
But the medication does not treat the autoimmune side of it. It treats the basically deficit that the thyroid is no longer able to produce the thyroid hormones at the rate it should do. So that's what the treatment is for, is to replace those thyroid hormones. It's not to deal with the autoimmune side of things.
Okay, interesting. So we're replacing hormones, not dealing with the inflammation.
Yeah.
Obviously that's not going to help the problem, or it's not going to at least eliminate the problem. It's probably just masking some of the symptoms.
Yeah.
Hello, Western medicine.
Exactly. Yeah, I struggled really badly for years on the medication because I hadn't addressed what was causing the inflammation. Once I started to unpick that and treat that from a holistic side of things, a lot of my symptoms just completely disappeared.
Completely disappeared. That's amazing. So let's hear a little bit about your story. Can we dive back into your past and into your present a little bit, Hellen? Tell us a little bit about how you got into this space and your own experience.
So I would say my first symptoms started to appear when I was at university.
Okay.
And there's quite often triggering factors of what will trigger that autoimmune response in the first place. stressful events, traumas, infections, and it's usually a combination, poor diet, things like that. So for me, I'd had several bereavements. I was at university studying with lots of exams going on. I had glandular fever. I also had a vaccine for hepatitis B. My diet wasn't great. I was partying, I was studying and like exercising like crazy. So my life was just non-stop all the time. Yeah. And it was already in that state when those final insults kind of hit it. It was primed and ready to kind of tip it over that edge. Mm-hmm. So that was the start of it. And it was intermittent, on and off for years. So some digestive issues, some fatigue, and then it'd disappear and clear up. And that was probably corresponded with what was going on in my life. Stressful events, kind of work changes, house changes, things like that would flare it all up. I was diagnosed with celiac when I was 26. That was my first diagnosis. I had an abnormal thyroid result at that point, but they followed up, and the second time it was fine. So they left that, and I wasn't retested for another 8 years. And in that time, yeah, that's a long time. And in that time, yeah, and I was getting worse and worse. My symptoms were becoming more and more severe. It was starting to impact my work, my life, my socialization. I couldn't play sports. My fatigue at this point was really, really quite intense. So it had a really big effect. They should have tested the antibodies when they had that first abnormal test, and they didn't. And that is something that I would like to emphasize, is that if your doctor is just testing your TSH and you're going in with symptoms that are typical of hypothyroidism, and they're saying, no, your thyroid is fine, please ask them to test your thyroid hormones, antibodies, because you can
antibodies. Request that test specifically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because you can have that autoimmune process going on in the background for a long time before it gets to the point where the thyroid is sufficiently damaged that it can't produce sufficient hormones anymore. So if you know you've got Hashimoto's, you can start making those changes to your diet, your lifestyle. I mean, by the end of it, I was diagnosed with pernicious anemia, which was a B12 deficiency, an autoimmune deficiency, and also fibromyalgia. And by this point, I was in huge amounts of pain. So kind of getting myself up in the morning, showering was really painful. The fatigue was just incredible. So I had no social life. I couldn't do any sports, any activity. Any exertion really knocked me for six, and my mood, obviously, as you can imagine, when it's affecting your life to that extent, was pretty poor at that point. It was then that I kind of that's what pushed me into looking further. I just couldn't live like that any longer. It was too debilitating. And I come from a science background. I've studied biomedical chemistry at university, and I was like, there must be something more. There must be something that I can do that's going to help this.
Brilliant. Okay, so we get to the point where you're like at the breaking point. All right, something has to change. What did you change? Where did you look for that information? And then what did you try and what worked?
So I was looking at different medications. I was looking at research on kind of the holistic side of things. And for my 40th, I had a friend who brought me a nutritional therapy session. And working with that nutritional therapist made me realize that just some simple changes could make a massive difference. She put me on what is known as the AIP protocol. So it's an anti-inflammatory diet. It's quite restrictive. It's not something that I would go to as a first port of call, but I was in a mess at this point. So we went in quite extreme so that I could get some results from it quite quickly. I followed that diet. That lowered the inflammation. The digestive issues that I'd had for probably 20 years by that point disappeared within 3 or 4 weeks. The insomnia that I had for the same 20 plus years just completely disappeared. They were the two big things that I noticed straight away. She retired.
So those huge, I mean, you're saying that you don't recommend this intensive approach, but within how long of a time period? A week, or 2 weeks, a month?
Yeah, I would say the insomnia was the first thing that I noticed, and it's what made me stick to it. It was quite hard initially because it cuts a huge amount of food groups out. But then I would start to notice probably within the first couple of months that my digestion had completely changed. I wasn't having the bloating, I wasn't having the cramping that I'd experienced daily. I was going to the bathroom normally, which had been an issue for years. It was pretty depressing and debilitating at times.
Wow.
So
Okay. So you feel like this extreme measures that you took led to some pretty intense or some
yeah,
pretty life-changing results, though.
yeah.
So
Oh
is
gosh,
there
yeah.
a way to do a less intense approach, but still get those life-changing results?
Oh, yeah. And that's what I do with my clients. When I work with them, I look at individual issues that are going on, what is going for that person. There are certain foods that are going to be an issue that I tend to take out for everyone because they drive the autoimmune process and they drive that inflammation process.
Okay,
Um,
what are those foods? Can I ask?
yeah, gluten tends to be one that drives, it causes inflammation and it drives the autoimmune process.
So
Um,
with gluten, I know a lot of people feel frustrated by trying to eliminate gluten because it's in so many things. And people that I work with that have to eliminate gluten feel like they have to make every single thing from scratch. Is that your experience, or do you feel like there's more resources out there than people realize that are gluten free?
there are more resources, but a lot of the free from products, so the pre-made gluten-free products, are just as bad as the gluten itself. They can cause what's known as leaky gut, that intestinal permeability, which is what the gluten does. And that
Oh, snap.
that leaky gut allows the autoimmune response to kind of be accelerated, if you like, kind of to be pushed down that pathway.
Okay, so you're
Um,
looking at Costco and you see gluten free on the box. It's not
yeah, because
necessarily a safe choice.
No, because they've got lots of refined carbohydrates in there. They've got lots of sugars in there. They're highly processed. They've got emulsifiers in there, which again can cause leaky gut. A lot of the additives in them can cause leaky gut as well. So yeah, they're not a healthy option.
Okay,
They're okay as
so I don't
they're
know if
okay
you
as an
listeners are doing this too, but this feels like a spiral downward of, okay, now I
yeah,
can't eat those and I can't eat those and I can't eat
yeah,
those. Give us some help. Give us some
yeah.
help, Helen. What can we eat? What
So,
is the food swap for instead
so
of eating gluten-filled foods? What do we do instead?
I found that the mindset shift was the biggest thing. For me, it wasn't a treat anymore if it made me that ill.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but there are things that you can have that are naturally gluten free, like grain replacements. So things like buckwheat you can use in place of normal wheat. It isn't actually a wheat product. It is actually a grain. It comes from the rhubarb family.
Okay. So
Um,
buckwheat, we use that instead of flour, or where do
yeah,
you
yeah,
okay.
you can use it in place of flour. You can get pastas made from it, noodles made from it, wraps, pancakes, things like that.
Okay.
Um,
And do
if
they
you
sell
are going to
those kind of products in regular stores, or do you have to find those in like health food stores?
It's becoming more and more now that most stores are starting to stock alternatives.
Awesome.
So in my supermarket here, they will have split pea pasta, they have chickpea pasta, which are great alternatives to like normal pasta. They have the buckwheat pasta in there. Sometimes you'll find quinoa pasta, things like that. You want to be looking for those grains that haven't been refined. So if you find a gluten-free bread that is the products in it are from buckwheat and they're from quinoa, the chances are they haven't been refined. If they're whole grain, they haven't been refined, they're going to be better for you. So it's about reading the labels and making healthier choices between two products of which one's got a list of 20 odd ingredients that doesn't look great and which one's got like 5 or 6 and it looks a bit better.
Okay, good deal. So we're reading ingredient labels. We're looking for buckwheat. We're looking for chickpeas. We're looking for, I don't know. What else did you say?
Split peas,
Split
amaranth,
peas.
millet. What else is there? Sorghum. You can use seed flowers, things like flaxseed flowers, hemp seed flowers. So there's quite a lot of stuff out there now that when I was first diagnosed with the celiac really didn't exist,
Wild.
or was very speciality. You had to get it from like specific places. It is becoming now more mainstream and more accessible.
Okay, awesome. So some of the comments coming in, red lentil pasta is a great option. Yes,
Yeah.
beautiful. Um, okay, so Brenda is saying, okay, in other words, we're eating whole foods only. Is that kind of the swap from gluten to non-gluten? You feel like you're just eating whole foods, or do you feel like there's still some more out there?
It's pretty much whole foods only. That's what I follow because that's how I feel best. I do have clients that have that balance that when they go out or they go on holiday somewhere, they will relax it a little, but they just have to be aware of that payoff of how far they can take it. Can they have the occasional bowl of gluten-free refined pasta when they're out and it not be a problem? I can't personally, but if clients can, then when you're on holiday and when you're traveling, if it makes life easier, then that's fine. But I do try and prepare if I'm traveling and going away. So I'll find and research restaurants that cater for dietary issues before I go so that I know when I get there I've got go-to places. I've got supermarkets that sell products that I know are going to kind of suit me. I also make snacks and things that freeze and that I can take with me. If you're traveling kind of by car or by plane, if things are frozen, usually it's not an issue. So yeah, it is about preparation. You can kind of take shortcuts as long as it's not something you're doing kind of on a regular basis. That's when the problem comes in. If it's driving that inflammation constantly, that's when it's going to be driving those symptoms for you.
Okay, so a lot of us think like, okay, well, I can't eat here, and now I have to not eat that restaurant, and it feels like you're being restricted. But most of us really live pretty routine. Like you have your 3 favorite restaurants that you go to all the time.
Yeah.
The mindset shift here that you could probably make, Helen, you can back me up on this, it would be find 2 or 3 that you can find a lot of places. So like if you live in the United States, find a couple of food chains that support dietary foods that you know are gluten-free and well made for your specific needs. And then have those be your go-tos instead of when you get to a new city, okay, you know what, I'm going to Nashville this weekend. I don't know what to do. But if you're like, oh, actually, you know what, I know they have this restaurant, then you feel a little bit of peace of mind of like, okay, if I can't find another place, I know I have this. So do you have a couple of those kind of restaurants? I realize you're in another part of the world, but just curious if there's any carryover.
I don't have in France. France is not the greatest for dietary requirements. I will say that. I will say though, when I do go to restaurants, I look for certain things on the menu that I know that's going to be easier to adapt. So pan-fried meats, pan-fried fish, they can be cooked in oils instead of butters because I don't have dairy as well. That can be another thing that's inflammatory and drives that autoimmune response. So I look actively for the meals that are going to be easier. If it's something that's slow cooked, if it's something that's pre-prepared, it's harder for them to adapt. So I look for restaurants that prepare from scratch, that use fresh ingredients, because I know they're going to be more adaptable than somewhere that everything is brought in, is pre-made or is kind of long cooked and can't be changed at that point of your ordering. I'm off to Florence in October, and obviously Italy is known for its pasta and for its paninis and all the things like pizzas. So I've been on Pinterest. And you will find if you're going somewhere specific, get on Pinterest and find somebody will have put a guide up to eating gluten-free in whichever city you're going to.
Oh,
and they will, they will have recommended specific restaurants that were great for it. Italy, actually, considering their staples are wheat products, is excellent for people that are gluten-free.
Fabulous. Good to know. All right, Brenda, let's go to Italy. Okay, love it, Helen. All right, so a couple of questions coming in. One from me is, do you feel like kind of that 80-20 rule is possible or recommended for people with Hashimoto's, people with inflammation, people with thyroiditis, where 80% of the time you're gluten-free, you're doing the whole foods diet, or I don't know, diet's not the right word, but lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then 20% of the time you can do, you know, occasional other things here and there, a little bit of gluten, a little bit of, you know, desserts, things like that. Do you feel like that is a sustainable model with these issues, or do you feel like those are detrimental to your long-term progress?
I feel they'll be detrimental long-term. It depends as well where you are when you start on the process. I was in a mess when I started, so I was really, really quite poorly. So I needed to go quite extreme. And then obviously being celiac, that is a very different thing to just kind of the gluten driving the autoimmune response. If I have the slightest amount of gluten, any cross-contamination, it makes me very sick. So for me, that is it's not worth it.
Not worth it. So that's the mindset shift right there, probably, that most of us need to make. Whether it's sugar, whether it's, you know, dairy, whether it's vegetables, vegetables, we'll talk about that in a minute. But whether it's, you know, different foods, gluten, other items, instead of seeing it as this is a thing I can't eat, sure, you absolutely can eat that, but is it worth it? Maybe that's what we need to be asking ourselves instead of can or can't I eat this food. It is, if I eat this, will it be worth it?
Yeah, that's the mindset I had to make of, this is no longer a treat for me. It's not a reward to have this if I'm then going to be ill, not just for a couple of days, but for weeks after. And that it's going to trigger the whole autoimmune side of things. And that could take months to get back under control.
Beautiful. Okay, so you suggested maybe pulling back on gluten. What other things could we pull back on? You mentioned dairy. Brenda would like to know if you can have dairy at all, and if that is regular for Hashimoto's people, that they're both gluten and dairy intolerant.
I don't have dairy at all. It does cause the same issues for me as gluten does. Not the same level of reaction because I don't have the autoimmune side of things with the dairy, but it will cause my symptoms. The protein in it it causes the increase of something called zonulin in your gut. The increase of that opens the barriers between your cells and allows things through from your digestive tract into your bloodstream. Your immune system has to respond to that. That increases the likelihood of your basically autoimmune reaction increasing, those antibodies being increased. That attack on your thyroid will be increased. Your symptoms will become more severe. So for a lot of my clients, they tend to go completely dairy free. Some will have a little bit and be fine every now and again. It is again that balance. Usually what I'll say when I'm working with a client is we start off strict to start off with to kind of reset, and then you can see how if a little bit of this or a little bit of that is going to have an impact, on what impact it's going to have, and is it worth it for you to risk that.
Okay, so follow-up question to that then, is that all dairy or is that just cow's milk dairy? Like would goat's milk still be okay, or particular cheeses like Parmesan, things like that aren't
so for me that's all dairy, but again some people find that they're okay with goats or sheep's, and they may be okay with things like hard cheeses. Softer cheeses and milks tend to be the most reactive. Okay. So yeah, the harder cheeses some people can tolerate, but again it will be an experimentation of try it and see what happens.
Okay, good deal. So with the experimentation, do you feel like one time is an indicator of, okay, this isn't a good food? I generally have what I call the 3-day rule, where you do something for 72 hours before you decide if it's a pattern or not. Would you agree with that? Or is it more of an immediate response with Hashimoto's and inflammation?
What I'll usually say to my clients is try and introduce it on one day and then leave 3 days before you try and introduce anything else, because it can take 3 days for a reaction to occur. So for some people, it may be immediate. For some people, it may be like 24, 48 hours after that they notice symptoms start to crop up. And it may not be digestive issues. It may be all of a sudden they've got a migraine, or their kind of sinuses are all really stuffy. Yeah, it could be like their joints may be really, really suddenly quite achy, or they're quite fatigued. So it's not always that initial just after you've eaten it, or kind of within that 24 hours, it kind of shows itself.
Okay, good deal. So introduce one thing at a time and give it a couple of days to see. Okay, yeah. Good. Next question, cooking oils and non-dairy protein. If you're not having a lot of dairy, you're probably not getting as much protein as you probably would be on a on a unrestricted diet. What are some of your top protein sources that are non-dairy proteins?
So obviously I eat meat, I eat fish, so they're really great sources. I don't eat eggs because for me that reacts. That's not for everybody, but that does for me. And things like beans and pulses, so your kind of chickpeas, your lentils, those kind of things are really good sources. I couldn't tolerate those before I changed my diet. They used to make me feel quite ill. When I went on the AAP and took them out of there, I struggled to reintroduce them. That's why I said I didn't recommend the AAP as your first port of call, because if you don't work on the gut healing as well as the elimination, when you're trying to reintroduce things, you'll still react. You have to work on that gut healing at the same point.
Oh, wow. Well, that's
so
interesting.
Yeah, so I couldn't tolerate those.
Even if you couldn't tolerate those kind of things, if you couldn't do the chickpea or the buckwheat before, give it a little time, perhaps, where you've removed the things that have been causing the issues, and then maybe a couple of months down the road, you can start reintroducing things again.
Yeah, and I had to actively work on like my gut health. I had imbalances I had to address, so probiotic foods. I had to increase my stomach acid, which is again something that can be quite low with those with Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. So kind of eating habits, stress before managing my stress before I eat, so I can increase my stomach acid. Digestive enzymes helped me to do that with some HCl in there. That made a big difference. So actively healing it made a big difference, because I kept trying to reintroduce foods before I'd done that, and yeah, I just kept reacting to everything. Once I'd done the healing, I was able to then reintroduce those foods, things like the nuts and seeds, again, not a great source of protein. I was able to reintroduce those without any problems.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, so let's talk about cooking oils for a hot second, and then we'll get into vegetables. What oils do you use for cooking, since you can't use butter?
Olive oil is my go-to. Coconut oil is another.
Do you recommend one over the other with cooking at a higher temperature? I know olive oil, you like to keep it somewhere in the medium temperature, not
medium. If you're going to do something really hot, then kind of probably the coconut oil is better than because it's the same as the butter. It's saturated, so it deals with higher temperatures easier. I avoid the refined oils, so like the seed oils. I don't cook with anything like that because of the process that they use when they basically make them. The refining, it alters the structure. Your system doesn't recognize it as something that should be eaten. So.
Yes. Yeah. It's fascinating research that's come out recently. Why didn't we find out all of this kind of information a million years ago, right?
I know.
It would have been really helpful if we just started with this. But hey, we'll take it as it comes. So vegetables. What if you are having issues digesting vegetables? Is this a gut health issue? And like you're saying, you work on healing first, and then down the road, you can bring these things back in. So it's not like a life sentence. You can never eat a leafy green or a head of broccoli or a tomato ever again.
Exactly. It depends on the gut healing, and working with a nutritional therapist and getting them to send off a stool test to analyze what is going on in your gut is going to be really, really beneficial. If it's raw vegetables that you are struggling with, my first thought would be, do you have SIBO? And do you need to get tested for that? Because that's quite common.
What is SIBO?
Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So basically the bacteria are growing. The bacteria in your gut they all have their preferred areas to grow in your digestive tract. If you get them growing in the wrong areas, in the wrong quantities, it can cause your food to be fermented in your small intestine when it should be fermented in your large intestine. And this is when you're going to notice that pain in the upper area of your stomach, your digestion area, above your belly button. Basically, you're going to notice maybe cramping and kind of a lot of gas. Basically, your food's been broken down in an area that it normally shouldn't be broken down in.
So what do you do about that? And how do you get it tested?
So it's usually a breath test. It can be indicated in stool tests as well. It is present depending on which bacteria are more dominant, which again is a nutritional therapist would be able to break that down and work out which bacteria are way too high and what that indicates. Does that mean that you've got that SIBO in all likelihood going on in the background? Traditional route would be to antibiotics and wipe it all out. However, the more holistic approach, the newer approach now would be to try and rebalance that. So introduce more of the good stuff to crowd out the stuff that's in the wrong place and the bad stuff.
Oh, interesting. All right. So working with a nutritional therapist, most people's insurance isn't going to cover this. What kind of
unfortunately.
I mean, what are we talking about here? Is this like a weeks, a months process? And where are we going to be set back with this kind of a test and a reading and information?
So the testing itself can be anything from 200 to 300 euros where I am here up. It depends what testing you're in. The SIBO, the test for SIBO is less expensive. It's a breath test, but the stool test is quite in depth, and what it measures and what it looks for, there's quite a lot there. So it can give you a really good idea of what's going on. So it is a big investment, but it can make a big difference. And I would say if you've got Hashimoto's and you've got SIBO, or H. pylori can be another kind of infection that can cause problems that is associated with Hashimoto's, you're going to probably need to work with a nutritional therapist for several months in order to get it sorted.
Interesting. Okay, so the test and the reading can be a quick, okay, you need to work on this or you don't, but the actual fixing of the issue is going to take several months.
Yeah, because I try not to take everything out for clients all in one go, because it can be overwhelming, and people don't tend to stick to it because it's just too much. Yes. So you want to work on things gradually, and you also want to know what's working and what isn't. And if you do it all at once, you don't know what's working and what isn't. Is this supplement working or not if you've introduced 6 at the same time? So yeah, it needs to be that progressive process.
Okay. So those of you that are thinking like, oh, I don't know if I can make this investment, or I don't know if I have the time or whatever, just ask yourself, like, how long have you been dealing with this kind of stuff?
Yeah.
And if this is really a solution that could help you, what would it be worth to you? It's probably worth a couple of months, probably worth saving your dollars and putting it into something that's actually going to help you, instead of going to the doctor every 10 minutes and getting the same response.
Yeah, I wish I'd done it sooner. I must have spent thousands on trying different supplements, trying different diets, trying different things, like appointments with doctors, paying for appointments because I couldn't get the appointments I needed. If I'd have just seen a nutritional therapist in the first place that specialized in Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism, the changes would have been much quicker and I wouldn't have struggled for so long.
So interesting. So Helen, let's go right into questions now. There's several questions coming in. avocado oil. What are your thoughts on avocado oil? Is that a good option?
Yep, that's good. I wouldn't cook with it, but I would say that's great for kind of salads and dressings, adding to your food after you've cooked with it, but I wouldn't cook with it.
Oh, really? I've not heard that. Okay. What about
Not,
baking? I know a lot of people are like, okay, every recipe for baking calls for vegetable oil. What do we do in baking? Do you do olive oil? Do you do avocado
yeah.
oil? Do you do coconut oil? Which one is best for baking?
It depends what it is. If it's a more solid fat, then I'll use coconut oil. If it's asking for things like butter, usually I'd use coconut oil. But if it's a refined oil, it's usually seed oil, then I'll replace it with olive oil.
Olive oil instead of vegetable oil. Okay, awesome. All right, root vegetables. What are your thoughts on root vegetables?
I eat root vegetables. I usually make sure that I try and balance my plate so that I've got half of non kind of starchy vegetables. And then my protein would be about a quarter, and then the kind of carby side of things would be about a quarter of my plate, and that'd include those root vegetables or the whole grains and things like that. They're naturally gluten-free.
Okay, beautiful. Do uncooked vegetables cause bloating for you or for most people with these issues?
For me now, no, but that is because I've worked on the gut healing side of things.
Okay, so would you recommend if people have an issue with raw vegetables that they cook them for a while till their gut heals?
Yeah.
And then they can start reintroducing raw?
Yeah, definitely soft cook your vegetables so they're already partly broken down, so your digestion doesn't have to work so hard.
Beautiful. Okay, awesome. The root vegetables and the goat's milk question.
What was the goat's milk question?
Is it all dairy that causes issues, or is it just cow's milk versus goat's milk? Things like that. You already hit that one.
The good side of that is at the moment that the vegan movement is growing. So I quite often find decent vegan cheeses now. You have to check the ingredients. Some are pretty just refined oils, but some are obviously made from nuts and just fermented. So you can get some really good options out there.
Okay, good to know. So with the gut healing, what would your top 3 recommendations be for healing your gut? Obviously, removing gluten.
Yep. So removing gluten, dairy as well, I would say that is something you want to be looking at. Balancing your blood sugar, because that can cause a huge amount of inflammation. So when I was talking about what I eat in proportion of my plates, making sure you've always got protein in there, you've always got fiber in there, you've always got the healthy fats in there as well, lots of leafy vegetables. So balancing that is going to be helpful for healing your gut. Avoiding those sugars, those refined carbohydrates that are inflammatory and cause that blood sugar imbalance. And then I would be looking at also lifestyle habits. Something that often gets overlooked is if you're eating when you're rushed, if you're eating when you're stressed, you're not releasing your digestive enzymes, you're not releasing that stomach acid when you should be releasing it. So you're going to struggle to break those down. It's going to cause inflammation, it's going to cause that leaky gut. So simple things that you can do before your meals is taking 5 or 6 really deep, slow breaths to kind of switch that stress response off. Chewing your food more thoroughly, taking your time, focusing on your food so that you're not being distracted, so that you're priming your digestion. Basically, your sense of smell is really important. So when you're prepping food or waiting for food, appreciating it, kind of really anticipating it. When you start to feel those digestive enzymes be released in your mouth, that's when you're priming your digestion before you even put that food in your mouth. So just some really simple things that they can really, really help when it comes to managing your digestion and healing your gut.
So we're working on digestion. How long would you say we should do these more extreme healing? How long do you think it would take? And what kind of feeling would you have when you know, okay, this healing is working, now I can start reintroducing things? Like, what does that transition look like?
So your gut heals itself really quite quickly for most people. So if you've not got any extra complications of SIBO and H. pylori and things like that, or parasite infections going on, and it's just an imbalance, once you kind of start increasing those fiber-rich foods that feed the good bacteria and eliminating the sugary foods, the refined carbs that feed the bad bacteria, it will start to kind of bring that into balance quite quickly, and you will notice your symptoms will change really quickly. So if you've been experiencing bloating, if you've been experiencing cramping, and kind of struggling to go to the loo or going too often, if you've been having reflux and things like that, they will change quite quickly, usually within a few weeks. You will still need to probably maybe do another 6 weeks, 8 weeks on top of that of extra healing. and kind of adding probiotics in there, adding probiotic rich foods in there, so things like that are fermented, and then things like kombucha and stuff in there, slowly adding things in. Stewed apple's a great one, that's really good for healing your gut. So with a little bit of cinnamon in to balance that blood sugar. So
Awesome.
yeah, I would
I've heard
say
good things about cinnamon and ginger. Do you have any, put cinnamon and ginger in everything?
So cinnamon is really good for helping balance your blood sugar. So if you're having something that's going to be quite sweet, that's such as fruit that is likely to spike your blood sugar, adding cinnamon in can just kind of counteract that a little bit, and making sure you're eating it at the same time. Make yourself some kind of gluten-free crumble that's got nuts and seeds and things like that in there, so you're getting the protein, the fiber, the healthy fats that balances the sugars out. The ginger is anti-inflammatory, so when you've got a disease that's driven by inflammation, such as autoimmune conditions, making sure you're getting plenty of ginger in there, things like turmeric, things like garlic are really, really beneficial.
Good to know. I do a lot of garlic in a lot of my cooking, and in my protein shake, you guys, I've started adding in ginger and cinnamon. You don't really taste it, but I put a pretty significant amount in there, and it's awesome. I love it. I really, really love. I can just, within a couple of days, I could feel a difference. So try doing that. If you're doing protein shakes, that's a great time to put them in. Let's see, other questions. What about, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say smoothies and protein shakes are a really good way to pack those extra nutrients in there that are going to be beneficial for like healing your gut. So getting the healthy fats, so getting seeds in there that you're not going to taste, they're going to be blended up. Getting nuts in there, making sure, like avocado is another great one to get in there. Making sure you're packing them full of nutrients, adding it in.
Fabulous. Love it. Stick them in there. Just add them into your deal. How are pastas made from lentils and quinoa not refined?
Because in the refining process, what happens is that they split the inner husk from the outer husk with grains, and basically the outer husk is discarded. That is where the fibers content is, basically where the fiber is. So that fiber, when you're eating a whole grain, slows that blood sugar response down, so it lessens the likelihood of that inflammatory response. If you are having it without that fiber, it is basically just being converted into sugar in your system. Lentils, what was the other one you mentioned? Lentils
And quinoa.
So again, quinoa is a seed and not a grain, so it doesn't have, it's more protein based than carb based. And the same with lentils, it's more of a protein than it is a carbohydrate, so it doesn't drive that blood sugar response and that inflammatory response, because proteins are slower to break down, slower to digest, so it doesn't spike your blood sugar as quickly. Carbs get broken down really quickly when they're refined, and it spikes your blood sugar really quickly. That's what the problem is.
Okay, good to know. Okay, next question. Have you heard of taking marshmallow root or cow's colostrum to coat the stomach before eating to protect the stomach from leaky gut?
Yep, they will coat the stomach. They can be used in healing with the gut. So marshmallow is one that I've used with clients before. Colostrum is, I've not used it so much for the gut healing side of things, but it is great for your immune system. So again, most of that is in that gut wall, kind of lining that gut wall. So yeah, it would be beneficial on that side of things.
Would you do that before everything you eat, or just occasionally?
If you are looking at gut healing, it would be something that I would look on doing it in a intense period, and then you wouldn't need to do it so regular. For me, I take the HCl, betaine HCl, to help me, because stomach acid is something that is, in research has showed that it's typically low in those with hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's. So I don't produce enough stomach acid in order to break the food down, so I take that. But again, that's something you'd need to work with a nutritional therapist with. I wouldn't recommend adding that in unless you know what you're doing. So whereas the marshmallow and the colostrum wouldn't be a problem to kind of do that yourself. So
cool, good idea. It says, what about Ezekiel bread?
Ezekiel bread. I've not come across that. I don't know if it's called something different over here.
It's pretty much just a bread made from sprouted grain. So
okay.
Yeah, if you have it, do you recommend sprouted grain bread?
So not if you're trying to avoid gluten and it's got gluten in it, I wouldn't know. But I do generally recommend sprouted kind of seeds and things like that you can make. I quite often have made breads using sprouted buckwheat. and things like flaxseed that you can sprout and things like that as well. So you can use alternatives as long as it doesn't contain the gluten.
Okay, good to know. All right, let's see. Oh, how do you stew your apples? That sounds delicious. What's your stewed apples recipe?
Really simple. It's just apples kind of peeled, chopped, some water, and then I usually throw in cinnamon and ginger because I quite like it having a little bit of fieriness from the ginger, and that's it. However, I usually use that more in the winter, and I'll make tubs of it, and I'll have some of it in the freezer, and I'll buy frozen fruit. So each time I buy frozen fruit, I'll buy a different kind. So one go will be rhubarb, it'll be cherries the next time, red fruits the next time. So I add that in with the apple to kind of up the nutrients that I'm getting as well.
Interesting. Is there a benefit to peeling your fruits and vegetables, or is the peel part of the nutrient value?
Quite often the peel is more nutritious than actually what's inside. So I don't keep the peel on when I'm stewing because I don't like the skin in the stewed apple. But other than that, I always eat my fruit with skin on. So apples, I always eat with skin on, pears, things like that. I never peel.
Okay, what about like cucumbers?
Yep, same. I don't do that either.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so if you can't stand the texture, you can peel it, but otherwise.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
Same thing with like a potato or
Yeah.
things like that, where and all the options that you can peel.
Yeah.
And one way that I do it with my kids is I usually peel about half. So that way they don't get a ton of the peel in the whatever it is,
Yeah.
but they also get the value of the peel. So
if it's going to be a difference of you don't like it with the peel on and you're not going to eat it if the peel's on, then take it off. You're far better off having it without the peel. So you are getting some of the nutrients than avoiding it completely.
I like that rule. If you're not going to eat it because it's the better version, then it's okay. Good, better, best.
Yeah.
Always, people. Good, better, best.
Yeah,
where are you at?
definitely.
Start where you are and then work up from there. Beautiful. Okay. Other last input, other last few steps we should take. I know you talked about getting tested for SIBO. Should people get tested for inflammation kind of stuff? Or do you feel like it would be more beneficial to just start making these lifestyle changes first, and then down the road, if it's still an issue, then go get tested?
Yeah, definitely. I would say make the changes, balance your blood sugar, get rid of the inflammatory foods, focus on whole grains, avoid things like the gluten and the dairy that we mentioned, and see what happens. Quite often that is enough for your digestion to start sorting itself out. And that's going to help your immune response. It's going to help that leaky gut. It's going to calm everything down. If you're still having symptoms after you've done this for a while, then I would say go speak to somebody and get tested.
Good to know. Okay, start with your lifestyle, people. Lifestyle first. Okay, one more question came in. What about oatmeal?
Okay, so oatmeal is, for me, because I'm celiac, it cross-reacts for me. The protein structure in oats is very similar to in gluten, so my system treats it as gluten. For some people that are celiac, they will find they have that same response. So I have that with rice, I have it with oats, of whether it works for you. If you are going to have oatmeal, make sure you're not having it on its own, because that's really high carb. It's going to drive that blood sugar imbalance and cause that inflammation. And flax into it, if you add nuts and seeds into it, or a nut butter. I usually add some fruits in there as well, some berries as well. But yeah, trying to balance it out so you've got some healthy fats in there, some protein and some fiber, so it's not just that carb on its own.
Beautiful. Okay, so balancing out. My last question then would be about softening or sort of sprouting your stuff on your own. So like soaking your nuts and seeds before you eat them, or soaking your oats overnight. Is that helpful for gut health?
Yeah, definitely. If you react to kind of things like beans and pulses, I would say soak them overnight. It breaks some of that structure down so that it's easy for you to digest, basically. And when you're cooking them, cook them till they're quite soft rather than al dente.
Okay, good deal. Cook things till they're soft. Chew your food extra long. All the things, you guys. Give your body a boost before you make it go to work. Just give it a little help. Give it a little help.
Yeah.
One last question about SIBO. Is there a way to naturally heal SIBO, or do you need antibiotics?
For some people, they can do it naturally, and in really stubborn cases, you may need antibiotics. It is very individual. If I was working with a client, I would try naturally first, of balancing everything first and seeing what happens.
Okay, so you guess, the moral of the story is whole foods, fiber, protein, less sugar, if not no sugar,
Yeah.
and less gluten, if not no gluten. If you're
Yeah.
having inflammation issues, remove those two for a hot minute and see if that helps. And anything that is causing you pain, just remove them for a minute. That's not forever. That's a big mindset shift right there. A lot of us are having this aha moment. I am particularly, okay, so I'm struggling with broccoli today. That doesn't mean I never eat broccoli again. That means I got some healing to do. And in a couple of weeks, couple of months, I'll bring it back in. There's a little bit of hope for me and broccoli to live together again.
Yeah, completely.
Beautiful. This has been enlightening. Oh my goodness. I love this so much, Helen. You just are a wealth of knowledge. You guys, if you are interested, she is a brilliant nutritional therapist. So if this is something you're struggling with, maybe you've had this for a long time, maybe you're like, all right, I just need some answers. Helen, where do people find you? How can we get a hold of you?
So I have a website, and that's hellenmallaburn.com. I also can be found on Instagram, again, Hellen Mallaburn. Facebook, can be found under nutrition, Hashimoto's Nutrition and Health. I think that's most of my social media. And yeah, obviously, if people want to email me, again, it's hellen@hellenmallaburn.com.
Okay, I will drop this website in the comments, you guys. Hellen Mallaburn right here.
Yeah, I think that has all my social links on there as well, and my contacts as well. So
perfect. So I'll drop that in there, and we'll obviously put all of your information in the show notes as well. So if you guys are catching this later down the road, you can certainly go to the show notes for all this information. Helen, you are delightful. This was so interesting, so enlightening, and just gives us a lot of hope to realize, you know what, the gut can be healed, and you know what, inflammation can be dealt with, and we don't feel like we don't need to feel overwhelmed by needing to, maybe we do need to do a couple of extreme things for a couple of months. But it's not forever. This is not a forever deal. And even if this is something that, you might have Hashimoto's forever, but you're going to find some different lifestyle changes that you can make that you can agree with, that are good for you. You'll find those Pinterest lists that can help you travel and find those restaurants that can still serve you. You don't have to make everything from scratch from home, and stay off the gluten-free Oreos. All right, Helen, any other last bits here? I'll check one more time for questions.
No, if anybody is struggling with kind of blood sugar balance and inflammation side of things, I've got a free challenge coming up on that next month. So
tell us about your free challenge. So is it in a Facebook group, or where do you have this free challenge?
It's in my Facebook group, and that is Hashimoto's Nutrition and Health, and it will be mid-September that I'm going to be doing it. I think the second week of September, and it's going to be teaching you how to balance your blood sugar. It's aimed at weight loss, but part of obviously weight loss is a symptom of that inflammation. So if you've got that inflammation going on, it's going to work on that side. It's going to help you with the energy side of things as well. So
okay, I'm also going to drop that in the comments. We'll also put that group in the show notes as well. If you're catching this down the road and the challenge is already over, it's all good. Join our group anyway.
Yeah, there's loads of information in there, and there's usually a wait list as well for the next one. So if you've missed this one, you can jump on the wait list for the next one.
Perfect. Brenda says, I just bought a package of gluten-free Oreos. How did you know? I know, Brenda, I'm watching you. Just kidding. No, I just know that those are the most advertised gluten-free product on the planet, in my opinion.
I'd eat them, don't feel guilty, and then kind of don't replace them. But yeah, don't waste them.
That. Just do it. You already got them. Do it, but then don't buy them again. Oh, this is good. This is so good.
And if you fall off the wagon and do something that you know you shouldn't have done, don't beat yourself up for it. Don't feel guilty, because that'll increase that stress response. So
true that. Just realize it's a process, and we're all making just one step at a time. That's excellent. Good. One last question: is oatmeal a fiber?
It does have some fiber in it, so yeah, you will get fiber from it. It depends again how it's being cut and refined, if they've removed it. But if you've got like whole grain oats, you'll get the fiber in there.
Permission, yes, permission granted. Eat the Oreos once. Eat them once.
Yeah.
And then we'll see how it goes down the road. So the rest of you that are wondering, okay, what about this free challenge, or what about what else is going on here? Realize that we do have free challenges to help you with your healthy habits. So these lifestyle changes that we keep talking about, the most difficult part of all of them is the consistency factor. So if the consistency factor is the issue for you, please get in the Healthy Habits Facebook group if you're not already in here. If you're catching this podcast recording somewhere down the road, realize We work on one healthy habit each month. You're not going to come in here and get this whole long list of a million things to do, one at a time, and we're taking action. So we're not talking about it. We're not learning about it. I mean, we are talking about it. We are learning about it. But the most important thing is that we're going to do it. We're going to actually do it, and we're going to stick to it and be consistent so that you can make these lifestyle changes instead of just, oh, I'm going to do this for a week and then fall off the wagon. No, let's get you consistent. Let's get you some incredible habits that will keep working for you long-term so that when you make these changes, you make them once and they don't have to keep coming up every couple of years where you're like, oh, I have to get off sugar again, or I have to, this again. But rather, you're just making a little bit of a shift at a time. We're going to start right where you are, and we're going to add on to what you already are doing because you're already doing amazing things. You have an incredible body and you're here. So you're making good choices for yourself. You want better things. Let's make it happen. Go to the Healthy Habits Facebook group. Every month I change the name of the group to match the current month's challenge. But you can always find Healthy Habits Free Challenge. That's the beginning of the name of the group every single month. Go to group.susiebhabits.com and that will take you to our Facebook group right here where you can get all of our Healthy Habits challenges and all the other good stuff that we do here in the group. Group.susiebhabits.com. This month, we are doing Meals and Move is what it's called. And this is about balancing your blood sugar. This is about fitness and nutrition, simplifying all of the things at once so that you can make progress without stressing about it. Like Helen is talking about here. Let's eliminate that stress response. Let's get your bloodstream back in order and help you master both getting in shape and losing some weight and nutrition as well. So get in here, join this free challenge. It starts Tuesday. Have a fabulous weekend, and we'll see you guys on Tuesday. Helen, thank you so much for being here. This is Hellen Mallaburn. She's brilliant. And if you guys are needing a nutritional therapist, highly, highly, highly recommend this woman. So go check her out, HellenMallaburn.com. Thanks for being here, Helen.
It's my pleasure.
All right, you guys, have a fabulous 4-day weekend, 3-day weekend, whatever it is. And we'll see you Tuesday in our free challenge for Meals and Move. Stop snacking, start slimming. I'm Susie B. This has been Hellen Mallaburn. We'll see you next time on Habits and Humor. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us this week on Habits and Humor, where you come to learn about health and habits and then take action. If you're ready to take action, join our free Healthy Habit Challenges every month in the Habits and Humor Facebook group, where we master one healthy habit at a time. It's fast, it's fun, and it's free. So whether you're feeling overwhelmed, confused, or frustrated by your health, or you just want to feel good about your body and your habits, get in here. Go to group.susiebhabits.com to join or DM me at Susie B Habits. That's SUZIB Habits. I'm Susie B, and this is Habits and Humor. Come to laugh, stay to learn, choose to live.